It seems to me like most people don't actually really deeply believe that they and everybody that they love will die one day.
Why does the world not feel safe to you?
It's not AI that's making me feel unsafe. It's the same things that have been making humans unsafe since the dawn of time.
We need to figure out the universe and bend it to our will.
Hopefully there'll be some kill all the humans function, and you can just be like, oh, if that one gets called, just shut it down.
What do you think it means, Jessica, to live a good life?
Oh, who knows?
Okay, Jessica, it's fantastic to speak to you today. I wanted to introduce you by, bringing up a quote, something that you wrote on the X platform that I saw about a month ago. You said, "The world does not feel safe to me, which I suppose is what drives my work. We've got to make AI good so that it can be a benevolent God and look after us. We need to figure out the universe and bend it to our will." Can you say more about what you meant?
It seems to me like most people don't actually really deeply believe that they and everybody that they love will die one day. And I think that I kind of do believe that, and I'm completely unwilling to accept it, I guess. It's completely unacceptable to me. My husband, my daughter, my wonderful friends and colleagues, no, I am not okay with them going away. And I can't imagine myself ever being in a position where I'm like, yeah, that's enough. That's enough work. That's enough interesting projects. That's enough love and happiness and dinner parties and, I don't know, lying in the park on a sunny day. I'm done. I'm tired. Maybe I'll change my mind when I'm 80. I am not okay with it. And I think probably for the first time in human history, some people believe we have a meaningful shot at it, that not being the case, right? That it, death and illness and all of the bad things are maybe not necessarily inevitable. Maybe not for me, but maybe for my kid, right? And even if this chance is very small, I think it probably is very small. With great hubris, I really want to do everything I can to make that tiny chance a bit bigger. And I think artificial intelligence is our best bet. Not necessarily large language models, maybe. Yeah. And that's why I got interested in AI in a very kind of naive science fiction kind of way, over a decade ago now. Read a lot, too much science fiction, and thought, the solution to everything, artificial intelligence, let me go build one of those. That'll be great. And then obviously after, a decade of research, it's slightly more difficult than I would expect.
So that's interesting about the second kind of half of the quote. I guess you started though by saying, what you're worried about, that the world doesn't feel safe to you. If someone's not really familiar at all with kind of risks from AI and so on, and perhaps I guess this is mostly what you're worried about. Yeah. Why does it's not? Okay. Because I was going to say, why does the world not feel safe to you?
The world isn't safe right now.
Yeah.
People die every minute of every day from completely preventable stuff, whether that's diseases or diseases of aging that we've kind of decided we're okay with, which doesn't seem right to me either, or just stupid, senseless accidents. And obviously war and conflict and all of that nasty shit as well. Sorry, can I swear?
Of course, yeah, whatever you want.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, the world is not safe now. Whether AI in kind of the world that we're in today, the version of the AI future that we seem as a society to be building, massively exacerbates that risk or not, honestly, I am hugely uncertain on. I used to be extremely convinced that AI safety was the number one pressing research challenge. Looking at the models that we now have, this is maybe less clear to me. And I think recent work is actually relatively optimistic, in terms of reward specification, at least, right? Because these models do seem to have like a very deeply entrenched sense of like good shit, bad shit, without us having to necessarily like enumerate all of the good things and all of the bad things, which is of course impossible. I think there are definitely risks. Like there are absolutely fucking huge risks. And I'm really glad that so many people now are working on AI safety, including us, I guess, in a small way. We are like at our core, we're an interpretability research lab. It just so happens that we're actually applying that interpretability in a very targeted way rather than just producing, like research output. So no, I guess to clarify, no, it's not AI that's making me feel unsafe. It's the same things that have been making humans unsafe since the dawn of time.
Sure. Interesting. So can you say a bit more about what has changed in your mind? You said you used to be very convinced, very worried about all of these kind of classic AI safety arguments. You've seen the models lately. Yeah, what's changed? What gives you a bit more hope these days?
So there was a recent paper that came out. You'll probably remember it better than I do because I'm slightly fried. But basically, we found a direction. Like if you prompted a model, or maybe it was fine tuning a model to produce unsafe code, it was way more likely to do lots of other like bad stuff, unsafe stuff, and be generally, like evil-ish. This maybe slightly counterintuitively, I think, is actually an incredibly positive, optimistic response because it kind of implies there's this like direction, right, with all of the bad things and then all of the good things. So that's much easier than having to, specify do good things for humanity, but absolutely don't tie us all down and inject us with heroin to make us super happy, and like absolutely don't kill us all so that no more unhappiness exists. Like it seems unlikely now that we actually have to try and figure out a way to encode it. It seems like the models have actually got like a really strong sense of this continuum and like where we actually want them to be. This is by no means the only thing that we need to worry about with AI safety. I think we're starting to see all of these kind of like way more agentic paradigms, which feels a bit concerning, particularly if somebody figures out a way to, this probably already exists actually, figures out a way to completely end-to-end train like very capable agentic systems with respect to like single-mindedly optimizing some goal. That seems obviously bad. But yeah, I guess that's one example of a recent result that has updated my thinking. Probably more generally, my vibey take on this has shifted somewhat just through spending a lot of time actually working with AI models and building AI systems and like doing interp. And yeah, I don't know. I know for some people working in interpretability has like massively increased their concern about these risks. So it could be that I'm just entirely miscalibrated. I would say now that I am cautiously optimistic.
Sure. Yep.
Which is by no means to say that I think AI is a solved problem or AI safety is a solved problem. I think it absolutely is not. And I'm very pleased and excited to see all of the incredible people around us working on this problem and doing great work. And it's for this reason and kind of like the rise of the AI safety movement that has kind of made me feel a bit more optimistic as well. Because back when I first started thinking about these things, you talk about AI risk, people look at you like you've just fallen out of a tree. It was completely outside of the Overton window. And now it's something that is, I think on everybody's mind. If you talk about artificial intelligence, people are concerned in general. Whether that actually translates to the major labs taking it seriously, I'm not sure. Obviously, the incentives aren't exactly aligned in that respect. Did you read the AI? What was it? AI 2027?
Sure. Yeah.
What did you think about? Am I allowed to ask you questions?
Yeah, you can if you want. Yeah, I guess these are people who are a little bit more worried than sounds like you that sounds like you are.
I don't. My uncertainty is so high.
So you're more in the middle, more uncertain. Yeah, they seem
I'm
more pessimistic.
extremely uncertain. And honestly, I don't get how anybody gets to like absolute certainty on either end.
Yeah,
It's just
sure.
like the world is so
I
big
agree.
that this is like a really new technology. It's growing incredibly fast. Yeah.
It's interesting. Two of the things you've said remind me of exactly two things I've heard Demis Hassabis say. He says he's cautiously
He's a great man.
optimistic. Well, it's interesting, yeah, because he said, I'm pretty sure he said same as you, cautiously optimistic. And he said your other point, which is you've got people who are super confident it's going to go well, and super confident people who are super confident it's going to go badly, and he's more in this uncertain range. So hey, maybe share some
Yeah,
similar views.
me and Demis, peas
Interesting.
in a pod.
Well, that's interesting because one other thing I'll come on to later as well is ask you about the kind of scientific discovery work you're doing, which again, I have some questions related to that and what DeepMind have done. So there's some parallels. But let me just move on a little bit. So you mentioned Leap Labs, which is an organization that you're a co-founder of. So yeah, what are Leap Labs? What do you guys do and get up to exactly?
Yeah, we are a deep tech startup. We've been going 2 and a bit years now, I think. Initially, we were just interpretability research. We were trying to build this interpretability platform. We were doing a load of work on like prototype generation, which is, I guess, kind of building on. You might remember some of Chris Ola's feature viz work. Absolutely spectacular, gorgeous stuff. Yeah, and we kind of in a similar vein, but we were really interested in doing it in a very model agnostic way, so that it would be extremely broadly applicable. Very interested in trying to render human passable all of the stuff that goes on inside the model. So like with stuff like sparse autoencoders, like it's really cool, but you get maybe like this huge big list of concepts that the model has learned, and it's maybe slightly difficult to get from that to like, I mean, all right, what do I do with this big list of concepts? So we were very interested, and still are really, in more kind of like Gestalt understanding of what a model has learned. So like relationships between input and output space, really. Yeah, so we kind of started off doing that, with the kind of the core premise being, particularly at the time, like interpretability is insanely useful, but nobody's really doing much with it outside of academia. Obviously, this is a couple of years ago. And we should, like, everybody who's building AI systems should be doing interp. And like our goal at Leap then was to make state-of-the-art interpretability accessible to everybody. Machine learning engineers, all kinds of different models. We started out with images, but we were like in the process of expanding to like text and tabular and all kinds of stuff. Because interp is really useful, right? You can use it to figure out if your model is like sexist or racist or going to do something that's going to really embarrass you, or do something unsafe. Indeed. You can use it to try and like predict failure modes before they actually happen in deployment if you can understand your model really well. But then there's this kind of other application of interpretability, which really came out of my PhD and the work I did at St. Andrews then, which is, what if the model knows how to do something that you don't know how to do? Like, what if it knows something you don't? Like, what if it's found some patterns in the data that you're not aware of? If you've got really good interpretability, you can find those out, right? And this kind of came out of work during my PhD, where I was building vision models for histopathology. So like diagnosing cancer from biopsy slides, identifying different kinds of immune cells and stuff like that. I ended up training a model that could do something that pathologists, like human pathologists, just couldn't do. Like they didn't know how to do it, but this model could do it. And so there's this really interesting question, which is like, well, how? Like what has it learned? What are the patterns? And ultimately, like at Leap, we decided that this was the most interesting application of interpretability, and like nobody else was doing it. And so we kind of like really narrowed our focus, and since then we've been building tech, doing interp research for this very purpose, which is knowledge discovery, scientific knowledge discovery from data.
Sure. I guess there may be also some kind of more non-technical people watching this. So just to go back to a slightly more basic question, how do you understand what mechanistic interpretability is, and how do you think the kind of state of it, the field is going now? People have, I guess, different views on the hopes for it, and maybe the people are not so optimistic about its chances of helping. Like, how do you, what is it, and how do you kind of see the field?
With respect to AI safety, you mean, or just in general? Or
Sure, maybe both of those. Maybe AI safety, and then, as you say, this slightly different thing for helping science and so on and other things.
I think maybe I can just kind of say more broadly. MechInterp is great, but I think it suffers from some of the problems possibly inherent in the fact that it's a very young field that's come out of a very distinct group of individuals. Like, there's a culture around AI safety, and a lot of the researchers, maybe less so now, but a lot of the researchers working in MechInterp for AI safety, exceptionally smart, maybe a little bit young, not that that's a bad thing or something, but really trying to prove themselves. And as a result, I think what we've seen is an extremely trend-driven kind of like body of work. I remember at one time, so I mentored for Mats a couple of times, and I think at one point, fully 50% of the cohort were working on sparse autoencoders, because that was kind of like the in thing that everybody was doing. Now it turns out the sparse autoencoders maybe not as good as we thought, and I feel like this is maybe why some people are feeling a little disillusioned. I don't really know. I am broadly optimistic. It's a young field. It will grow. There will be paradigm shifts in terms of how we understand even the problem. Maybe to answer your earlier question for potentially non-technical viewers, I guess I would describe mechanistic interpretability as trying to understand an AI model, typically a neural network, well enough so that you could reverse engineer it, I guess. This is obviously an extremely ambitious goal. I think it's a noble one. We are less mechanistic in our approach at Leap. Insofar as even if you could understand a neural network that well so that you could write it all yourself in code, it's not super clear to me that is actually extremely helpful, just because we already have massive code-based systems that are basically opaque, right? Because they're too big for any one human to hold in their head all in one go. And it seems to me even if you could reverse and engineer a state-of-the-art model, you'd probably end up with something like that. This is still obviously extremely valuable for lots of different things. Hopefully there'll be some kill all the humans function, and you can just be oh, if that one gets called, just shut it down. I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm disillusioned. No, I am optimistic as ever.
Great. Okay, and then at Leap, so you're using interpretability. I guess you're your kind of key case here to kind of help accelerate scientific discovery. And you've got this thing called the discovery engine, which, if I'm right, it says it's a completely automated end-to-end system for finding hidden patterns in data. So what is this discovery engine for someone that's maybe never heard about it?
So this is leveraging the idea that neural networks are really, really, really good at pattern recognition. In fact, that's basically what they're for. They're better than humans at this, at finding patterns, nonlinear, complicated patterns in big data sets, or even in small data sets, really. And that's great. Maybe you can use that to automate some tasks, but we think it's much more interesting if you can kind of reframe it as a lens through which to understand the data. Chris Oler actually mentioned this idea, microscope AI, in a blog post a long time ago, maybe a decade ago. So kind of put simply, we train an AI system to predict something that we care about from a scientific data set, and then we apply our interpretability methods to understand what that model has learned. We pull out from this model all of the patterns that it's found in the data, and we render them human passable so that we can understand. And quite often, some of these patterns are stuff that we already know, stuff that already exists in the established scientific literature. Sometimes they're just noisy, like if the data set's noisy or too small or like flawed in some way, that obviously comes out. But surprisingly often it finds patterns that like make sense, but that we didn't really know existed. And we've been applying this like with academic partners to real world data sets. We made some novel discoveries. Yeah, it's been great.
Can you tell us about a couple of those novel discoveries that you made?
Yeah, sure. So one of the very first collaborations we did was with the Institute for Plant Science. And our collaborator there was working on root structures, which sounds kind of like niche and boring. Well, not boring, obviously, but it's actually crucial for many, many things. Like the root structure of a plant helps determine how robust it is to like bad weather conditions, how robust it is to drought, like the yield of the crop, like all of the stuff that's incredibly important for food security, particularly as the climate's going a bit mad. All of this stuff. So what our collaborators were interested in is understanding how various environmental variables and the genotype of the plant affect these various root structures. One of them is root length, and there are some more sophisticated ones as well that measure different things like the angles of the roots and stuff like that. So they had this data set. The data set had like 20 different genotypes, like 50 different nutrient combinations, information about the temperature, information about like the sorbitol in the soil, all of this different kind of stuff. And typically they'd maybe spend a few months making sense of this data, doing statistical analyses, trying to understand what the data was telling them, really. So what we do is we let neural networks take care of finding those patterns. We automatically train a neural network as well, I should say. We don't expect the plant scientists to do that, for which they are grateful. And then we pull out the patterns that it's learned, and we found lots of different stuff. But some of the most interesting patterns were around different combinations of plant genotype and a nutrient mix in the soil. So we found several things that have a combinatorial effect. So maybe like one genotype by itself does particularly well in certain conditions, and one particular like nutrient profile in the soil does like generally, increases yield a bit or something, increases the root length a bit. But when you combine them together, you get like this really significant uplift in root length, for example. And it's these kinds of patterns that unless you already know what you're looking for, they're actually really difficult to find with manual analysis. So everybody's pretty excited. We're writing up this paper. I think our collaborator wants to publish it in Nature Plant, which would be amazing. This is kind of one of several case studies that we're working on right now.
Yeah, so I think it's just amazing that already you've had some actual insights and work. You started a couple of years ago, and here's some actual outputs.
We couldn't believe it. It was
cool.
it was literally like the first external case study we did, and our collaborator was like, "Oh, this is amazing." Yeah,
awesome, great stuff. You've got this blog post on your website, a new scientific paradigm. I guess this is your kind of hopes and what you're trying to do. So what would you say is the difference between what the kind of scientific process you're trying to do with Leap compared to the current process? What's the difference? And I guess most importantly, what are the problems with the current scientific process? How's it slow and so on?
Okay, so right now, like scientific process is something like, I'm a scientist, I read some papers, I like have a think, I come up with a hypothesis, like a question that I want to answer, and I kind of shape this into a hypothesis that's testable. And then I go out into the world, into my lab, into the field, wherever, and I try and gather some data. I'd like design an experiment to get some data that will enable me to either say like, my hypothesis was correct, or no, my hypothesis was wrong. And then I take those findings and I write a paper about them, and I try and get it published in a good journal. And then you kind of repeat this cycle. This has a few problems, I think. One of the biggest ones that it's difficult for us to fully address, but it's one of the real motivating factors behind this idea of a new scientific paradigm, is the replication crisis, which I'm guessing you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you just sort of want to give a one-liner on what that is in case one doesn't know?
Yeah. So maybe like, depending on the field, this varies a bit, but like in some fields, like half of all published papers are just wrong. They don't replicate. If you did the experiment again, like you would get a different finding. There are lots of different reasons for this, which I'm kind of happy to dig into a bit if you want, but it will just be me ranting about the state of scientific discovery. But yeah, like this is terrible, and it's terrible because like the rate of novel discoveries is decreasing when it should really be going up. You'd hope. It's terrible because when I'm sat reading papers as a research scientist, when I'm trying to think of a hypothesis, I'm basing that on what I read in the literature. So you get this compounding effect. There's a really famous example in study of Alzheimer's. One major paper was published, very influential, turned out to be completely wrong, and probably set the field back 10 years.
Oh, wow.
The human cost of that is insane, right? 10 years further from a cure, like it's actually horrible. It's extremely upsetting. And yeah, this is a major problem. It's also kind of sad because the fact that the published body of literature, humanity's record of scientific thought and experiment, is something that you might want to train a large language model on to help you do science. And this doesn't really work because the underlying data is bad. This is a real shame. And it's kind of doubly concerning that, like some labs, understandably, are trying to apply LLMs for the automation of scientific discovery. A noble pursuit, great. The problem is not only that like the underlying literature is flawed, it's that LLMs themselves are like explicitly trained to generate extremely plausible text. And they only know about text, So what you get is kind of like LLMs that occasionally hallucinate, that output extremely plausible documents, papers, even scientific papers, that are informed by other papers in the literature, which may not replicate. And then, of course, these papers that are like frankly wrong, often in very subtle, pernicious ways, are included in like the broad scope, like all of the grand corpus of scientific literature that we have. And so the problem compounds and compounds, and it just gets worse and worse. This is tragic. Like the AI dream utopia future that I personally would very much like to see rests on a foundation of scientific progress. And the current scientific method is not working. LLM issues and literature issues aside, there are lots of perverse incentives that have caused this to be the case. I think the scientific method itself, this notion of like literature, do a hypothesis, do an experiment to test the hypothesis, share those results back into the literature, is actually not well suited to today. 400 years ago, this was absolutely the best we could do. But now it kind of seems insane to accept human-driven hypothesizing, which is like necessarily biased, limited in scope, determined by the individual scientist or group of scientists, like their training, what they've read recently, what they've had for breakfast, what they're thinking about in the shower. Like it's incredibly limiting. It massively limits the scope of potential discoveries because you're already focusing on this narrow slice, like this one hypothesis that you want to test. It also massively invites confirmation bias, right? When you're designing an experiment with a hypothesis in mind, you do your best not to be biased, but it slips in, This isn't helped by the incentives in publishing. You've got to have a publishable result. You've got to have a positive result. You've got to work in an area that attracts grant funding. If you don't get like nice publications in high tier journals, like you're probably not going to get a good job, etc. Yeah, it all massively compounds. So then you end up with like a biased hypothesis that informs a biased experiment that goes into literature and maybe doesn't replicate. And it's very bad. Okay, that's my rant about the current state of science over. Would you like to hear how we're fixing it, Joe?
Sure. That's the next question. Yeah.
I thought you'd never ask. Just kidding, you asked already. Yeah, so we think actually, in the age of big compute, sophisticated neural networks, lots of data, increasing amounts of data from all the scientists, all the scientific domains, stuff's like virtual, stuff's digitized now in a way that it wasn't like even 20 years ago, 10 years ago maybe. We actually don't need to rely on this like incredibly path dependent human driven process to try and find out insights about the world. Instead, we would propose something more like, hey scientist, you're interested in this phenomena, for example, the root length of your plants. I would now invite you to go and gather as much information as possible, like the highest quality information, as many samples as you can around this phenomena of interest. Measure everything, absolutely everything. Try not to be biased. Do your very best. And then bring that data to some data-driven discovery method, perhaps, that can automatically extract patterns from it. In this way, you kind of eliminate a lot of the bias. Obviously, like data gathering has its own biases, right? But we want to mitigate this as much as we can. And this allows you to much, much, much more fully explore the space of possible discoveries that might help you understand the thing that you care about better. You're no longer limited by like this very path-dependent hypothesis focus. It's just get all the data, find all of the patterns in the data. And the nice thing about this is because it's automated, because it's like literally data in, and then instead of a scientist doing analysis, maybe running the analysis a few different times till they get p-value that's suitable for publication, etc. Instead of that, you've got like, you've got a digital system, you've got an automated system, the data goes in, you get the patterns out, and that result is reproducible.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I am excited to see what you guys do with this and how many more insights you get and stuff. So wonderful. I want to ask you a lot more about that though, but in the interest of time, I just want to move on to a slightly different kind of set of questions for like the last 10 minutes or so. So just to understand a bit more about yourself, Jessica, like your journey and who you are. So if this is right, I think I saw on LinkedIn that it was interesting to see that before you went to St. Andrews, where you did your master's and PhD and kind of AI stuff, I think you did fine art degree.
I did.
Before that. So what was up with that? When did you then pivot into that? How did you get interested in AI and AI safety? What was kind of going with all that? Were you even aware of AI at the time, or like, what's the run through to here?
No, I'm like science fiction nerd, really. I was an oil painter for a bit, oil portraiture, and like some ink drawing stuff. I loved it. I went and did fine art practice and spent 3 years in this like painter's studio painting. It was fantastic. But yeah, and then obviously after art school, it dawned on me that I might want to make some money. So I ended up starting like a design and illustration firm, which I ran whilst digital nomading around for a few years. Great fun. Yeah. And I was always like vaguely aware of AI and like neural networks and stuff. But obviously I was, like I'm arty drawing, there be tech. But we started getting clients asking if we could build websites. Right? So one of the things the firm did was we do web design, we do branding, and we do like web design things. And initially I kind of forwarded those requests to a partner company who did web development. And so we'd send off our designs and they'd build a website, send it back. But it occurred to me that I could make more money if we did the web dev in-house. I thought I shall learn to code. How hard can it be? And I did, and it was great. And I completely fell in love with it. I love programming. It's so much fun. So I did like various web devy kind of things. I did the CS50 course. I don't know if you've heard of it. Got so into I learned to program in C. Oh, like yeah. it was incredible. And I was like, why have I been screwing around with all of this design stuff? Like, this is so much more fun because you can build things that do stuff. Yes, got really excited about that. And then I was living in Portugal at the time, and I went to a web summit in Lisbon years and years ago, and I saw a talk there. And it was about like the coming AI revolution. AlexNet had just come out. A couple of years ago, AlexNet had come out. And I was like, yeah, this AI thing, I think there might be something to that. So yeah, I decided, I'm not kind of messing around anymore. I want to do this. I started building neural networks for fun at home. The nice thing is, because I was doing all of the graphic stuff, I had like a really decent high-powered laptop. So I was able to like train these little neural networks, train, MNIST classifier, all of that, loads of fun. And thought, this is great. This is what I want to do. And then I applied to do my master's in computer science at St Andrews, and managed to convince them to give me a shot. Rest is history, I guess.
That's fascinating. What a journey you've had. That's super interesting. That's great. What do you think it is about you that makes you like suited to do this technical work, this scientific work? What's driving you? What skills do you have? Like, why are you the person doing this, do you think?
Oh my God. I like solving problems, I guess. That's such like a vapid thing to say. I just like to solve hard problems, Joe. I think I'm quite creative, I guess. And I think, research at its core, particularly in computer science, which is about like building things, making things, in large part, particularly in AI, because it's such a young and fast growing field. I think being creative, being a very creative researcher, is like a real strength. Like, there's so much space in AI, there's so many directions to like zoom off in on your own is underexplored or unexplored. So I think like being creative helps. I'm quite stubborn, I guess. Determined, maybe. Honestly, I mean, I have the most incredible team here at Leap. Incredible husband who's incredibly supportive. Will make sure I go to bed and don't stay up all night programming, whatnot. Not that I get to do much coding these days, alas. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm necessarily like exceptional in any of these ways at all, really. But I think you can just do stuff, Like, if you decide you want something to exist in the world, you can just like go and like give it a shot and do your best. Like, most things aren't that difficult if you're determined.
So just briefly, you mentioned your amazing team at Leap, and like I've witnessed like kind of you guys interacting a bit before, and it always struck me that you seem to have this very nice like culture. You're very friendly with each other. Can you just talk a little bit about the team and how you think teams should be set up and the culture at Leap? Like, I feel like you guys have got some secret sauce.
I would never be prescriptive. I think it depends on the kind of company that you want to build. We have indexed quite highly on culture fit. We are extremely, extremely picky about hiring. If you can come to work with people who are exceptionally good at their job and also a pleasure to be around, like it's a multiplier, and that's really, really what we kind of index on. Exceptional, dedicated, hardworking people, but we also very much aim for like, I guess, people who share our values, which is something like willing to work really hard, but you're not going to be a dickhead about it.
Nice. I get you. Yeah.
Sorry,
Great.
that's maybe not very useful. Be
No, no,
really selective about who you hire. It's the most important thing about building company.
no, that's great. Yeah, I
Right.
think people don't take enough care on that sometimes. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And the final question, Jessica, I always end the show by asking guests the same question. Don't know if you're aware of this, but just a small question, which is, yeah, what do you think it means, Jessica, to live a good life?
Oh, to live a good life. Oh, who knows? You have to make it up yourself.
Perfect. Great. No, that's great. Succinct and nice. All right, well, Jessica, thank you. Really enjoyed speaking to you today. It sounds like there's stuff you do at Leap is both fascinating and also, potentially going to be really valuable for the world if, you can help with science. And so, yeah, wishing you all the best. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.